as much things change, they stay the same, as, with another year coming to a close, it seems like my interest level in Let's Play series is at a low. But due to real life taking precedent over the virtual world, that is the main reason why the Let's Play series have seemingly hit a lull period, as I don't want to say I've been focusing on work, but I've been focusing on other things and going through some personal times. With that being said, let's see how well I can do as 2017 comes to a close with consistency and gaining momentum back for the series that once kicked down the view records on Wrestling Express and made me ecstatic, made me very happy to be on YouTube. Yes, dare I say, maybe fact of the matter is, I am maybe letting, part of it may be that I'm letting the statistics get to me, which I shouldn't be doing, but I think it's also more or less a mixture of that and other things, and maybe even being a little creatively stunted to this point in certain aspects of the Let's Play series. But either way, let's put that aside as we are back with another edition of Inside TEW, as we look into the TNA season that I started 5 years and 2 months ago, back in February 2004. And let me explain exactly how it could be February 2004 that I started it in. It is because, if you go back and click out of this, it is because back in January, I started with a company that, as you can tell, is now out of business. And that company is Ring of Honor. Yes, Ring of Honor actually went out of business 3 years ago at this point, in April 2006. But I ran the first show for Ring of Honor in the month of January, as I held the battle lines have been drawn in. I want to say that I did this show and that show, but this show wasn't me. I want to say I did this show and that show, but March wasn't me. I was gone by the end of February. And then if you shift over to TNA, I could probably tell you when my first show was with TNA. Show history, let's go back to 2004. Weekly pay-per-views. Once they switched from the honestly, I'm not sure when it was me. I'm honestly not sure when it was me. I think this might have been. I'm honestly not sure when it was me. I don't know. Well, this was me, I know that for sure. Oh, wait, I can pinpoint it. This. That might have been me. That might have been me. Because of one reason and one reason only, And that guy on the bottom, CM Punk, wasn't employed with TNA until I came in to the company and brought Punk in. And I could even go back and look to make sure that I'm not lying. Okay, I was lying. TNA had him signed before I got there. So, with that being said, I actually don't know when I started with TNA. But I do know it was early 2004, and I've been here ever since. I actually would leave the NWA in 2005 and bring in the TNA specific belts, other than the X Division title, because, as everybody knows, the X Division title was started with TNA, and is a TNA title. It never was an NWA championship, but the NWA World title was the NWA's title and NWA property for when the NWA when NWA and TNA did sever ties, the NWA would get the belt. But at this point, all the titles are TNA property. The first one being one that I kicked off, and that actually indicates when gives an idea of when I started. I started before Destination X 2004 because I set up the King of the X Division Battle Royal to where the winner of this Battle Royal becomes number one contender for the X Division title at a later date. Which Chris Candido has won, Jerry Lynn has won, Black Tiger, Andy Douglas, Matt Sydal, and also another title that started earlier than it actually did is the TNA Knockouts title. And the TNA Knockouts title started back in 2004 when I first came into the company, because there was a lot of women on free agency, and I thought, why not? Let's bring some women in and make a Knockouts division. You see the Hardys, Punk and Cabana. The only thing I would like to point out is this, that LAX second run with the belts, they held the belts from October 2007 till October 2008. They have the longest run with about a year, and the most defenses, because they held the belts a year. I just also want to point this out, that when the Hardys dropped the belts, that's when Jeff was leaving for WWE, and when Punk dropped the belts, Punk and Cabana, Punk was leaving for WWE. So within 4 months, WWE stole 2 of my top guys. Now we pinpoint this one. Yes, Sting was, I'm almost 100% sure that Sting was NWA World Heavyweight Champion when I retired the belts. Like the Hardys, they took over when I retired the NWA Tag Team titles, the Hardys took over and started their runs as Tag Team Champions. Yes, and Sting did the same thing with the World title. This used to be a tag team tournament, basically with the same concept of the King of the X Division, where tag teams would go into there would be a tag team tournament where the winners would become number one contenders and get a future tag team title shot. I'll go back to that, but I wanted to point out this one because I'm honestly surprised I kept these belts for as long as I did. But I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed having the belts, but it's very, 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 very hard to have 6-man tag team titles, because you feel like you have to have 3 guys with a connection to make them a stable tag team. A legitimate 6-man tag team champion. Like Roderick Strong and Davey Richards and Dolph Ziggler became a stable, the Dojo Bros. These guys were Simon Diamond's group. Simon Diamond was the leader, Rick Santo was a protege, Johnny Swinger and Simon Diamond have been a tag team. And I just want to also point out, well, actually, this was the Pitbulls and somebody, the Pitbulls and BJ. One of the Pitbulls were a tag team with BJ, and then the other Pitbull came in. But I also just want to point this out, that I actually did have a hardcore title for TNA. It was basically like a European title where people who weren't doing anything got the belt. It wasn't until around the time that I released Raven, or Raven won the belt rather, that I actually started using it as a hardcore title where Generico won it, Hollow Wicked won it, Love It won it, Bobby Roode won it, Cedric Strong, which is somebody who would be Roderick Strong's fake brother in Full Impact Pro, Jay Lethal, who I maxed as Hydro, and Don Harris was the last champion. So I've had quite a lasting. I've gone through my phases with TNA. 6-man title phase, hardcore title phase, the NWA. I booted myself out of it a lot quicker than TNA actually did. TNA didn't leave the NWA until 2007, but I guess in a way I just wanted to start establishing my own identity sooner rather than later. Also, I know I pointed this out earlier with the tag team titles, but by the end of the year, with Punk leaving in the early part of the year, Cabana became world champion by the end of the year. Yes, only holding the title for about 3 months and looking more like a transition champion to AJ Styles than anything else, but but in a way, it's still an indication of, oh, Punk's gone, Cabana's here, why not I just give the push that I was going to give to Punk to Cabana? And yes, AJ Styles is here in TNA, and the only person to hold the title multiple times thus far, because most people have gotten stolen before they could. I just also want to look at here. AJ Styles and Nigel McGuinness are officially my 2 top stars, with AJ reigning over Nigel a little bit due to just beating Nigel for the belt, as Nigel kicked butt last year due to my booking of Nigel, with him going 19-3 last year and really reigning over TNA. I guess in a way, you could say, as I rhyme. But now this year, Nigel's becoming more human, I guess you could say. Now, to talk a little bit about Jeff Jarrett and my character, Jeff, I actually had Jeff step away from TNA and step away from the ring, and I'm actually contemplating how I want to bring Jeff back, and when I want to bring Jeff back. Because at this point, he didn't retire, he just said he needed time off. But he went out as a babyface. I had him turn babyface, feud with AJ Styles one more time, and then go out with a hero's welcome. Yes, here's the other thing that needs to be pointed out, and that's John Cena was released by WWE back in December, and I signed him to bring him in to the company starting in January, and Cena is now one of the top stars with TNA. Go figure with that one. As usual, the par for the course, we move to the feuds, which I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way forward. Matt Sydal won, as you saw, the King of the X Division, and now moved into a feud with Pac, which is going to go a little bit longer than I usually go for the King of the X Division feuds, because I also usually don't go right out of it, because usually the X Division champion is feuding with somebody going into that show, And it's not, like, Destination X is usually the middle of the feud, not the end of the feud for the X Division title. It was the end of the feud where Pac won the belt, so different variation, which is something good for this season, because the only way you can keep going if you keep going after 5 years is finding new ways to make it different. Speaking of making it different, as I mentioned earlier, Nigel and AJ, with AJ just winning the belt from Nigel after Nigel almost held the belt for a year. A short feud, nothing more, just to give AJ Styles back the belt after not being the champion for a while. Even though, yes, Nigel was the one who beat AJ, and then AJ was the one who beat Nigel almost a year later. Go figure how that worked out. Recently, there's been a bitter feud between LAX and the Naturals, with LAX taking out Terry Funk, who is actually the mentor of Chase Stevens, and that sparking the feud with LAX turning heel. But after LAX losing their first feud as heels, they need a new tag team to feud with, and that's the newbies of John Walters and Kazarian, who just got brought back up from developmental as a tag team. Jason Cross and Marco Corleone. Marco Corleone, for those who don't know about Mexican wrestling, is Mark Jindrak, his alter ego from CMLL. And Jason Cross, I believe, worked for TNA for a bit, and is best known for his shooting star leg drop. The feud with LAX, and winning that feud led the Naturals to become number one contenders for the tag belts against the Kings of Wrestling. I know I skipped a feud, I'll go back to it. The Kings of, All-American, Dolph Ziggler and Davey Richards became a tag team at the end of last year, and I'm slowly but surely building them up as a tag team by giving them other feuds, with tag teams to build themselves up. And that's where they feuded with, the Elite and the Havana Pitbulls already, and have won both feuds. Now they're in a feud with Lacey's Angels, because Lacey, the former ROH manager, is managing Anthony Nese and The Miz. And I'm going to save the Del Rio feud for last, because, that also goes back to something else. But I just want to point out, but now that leaves this feud. And this feud is centered around the idea that last month, or 2 months ago, I purchased both Border City Wrestling and another Canadian promotion, which basically killed the Canadian independent companies in the Canadian independent circuit up in Canada. The independent circuit up in Canada, with two major companies going out of business. And that's where I brought in a lot of that talent to do an invasion, with Devin the Assassin, which is that guy who claimed Abdullah the Butcher gave him hepatitis, Chris Sabin, Carl Olay, Bret Hart, Jimmy Jacobs, Kevin Owens, Maurice, and a few other guys coming in to the company as invaders, trying to wreak havoc on TNA. And Alex Shelley is a defector from the company who, for those who don't know, is actually Canadian and is being mentored by Bret Hart. The main reason of this is the main reason of Bret's involvement in the story is Bret saw the hero's welcome, dare I say, that Jeff Jarrett was given on his way out the door, and he compared that to how he was treated when he was in the company with managing Natty a few years ago, and he was pissed off because he felt mistreated, and he felt like Jeff Jarrett was using his place in the company to give himself a bigger farewell, and treat him a bigger farewell as a way to erase all the bad he did in the years prior. But Bret Hart always had the best interests at heart, and now he turned his back on TNA and its fans to side with his home country. This one is one that I just began, as you can tell, with Del Rio going up against the Excursion World Champion, Tony Jones, who works for WLW, and I got on loan. For those who want to know what the Excursion is, the Excursion is actually... Wait. I'll go over here. The Excursion is actually the alliance that I joined after leaving TNA, after leaving the NWA. The Excursion, I formed alliance titles because I basically love the concept of alliance titles, and that's one of the reasons why I gravitate towards the 1980s databases, because of the NWA World title and the ability to, use the tag team titles, the world title, the junior weight title, etc. And I wanted to be a part of an alliance, but not one where it was where you're a subsidiary, more where you're your own entity. Even though, blah, 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 blah. But basically it was me and the NWA, Pro Wrestling Noah could take my world champion and have him fight on their show. This way, Tony Jones or Kenta Kobashi or Jun Akiyama or whoever is somebody's world champion, but it's not their actual world champion. You know what I mean? This way I'm not risking one of my top guys to go elsewhere. I basically joined the Learning Excursion Alliance that was set up between WLW and Pro Wrestling Noah. I basically replaced Pro Wrestling Iron in the Alliance. And basically, other than an old show that I used to do, and the Excursion Special, other than that show, I really never pushed the Excursion concept other than with that show and a feud between Takahashi Morishima and Michael Shane, because Michael Shane actually went off to WLW and became WLW World Champion. As an outsider, and would lay claim to, I left to go back to TNA, or, it was a long feud. Oh, actually, wait. It actually started in January and blew off at their big event in November, and then Morishima got the last laugh on Michael Shane after following him to TNA, and basically, you want to come into my backyard, I'm going to come into yours. So I was basically helping WLW and booking WLW while booking TNA at one point. But there are two other things that I want to point out with how, I don't want to toot my own horn, but from the start of the Knockouts division, 4 knockouts that I employed have won the Female Wrestler of the Year: Nora Greenwald, Lisa Marie, and Natty, based on how I booked them during the year. So I would I mean, yes, you may say, oh, but you have no competition, your only competition is WWE. Yeah, you're right, but in reality, look at, this is when Lisa Marie won the title. Won the thing. She held the Knockouts title for most of 2006. She held the belt for most of 2006, winning it in March, losing it to Natty for about a month, and then winning it back, and then keeping it until February 2007. And Natty, the same thing in 2007. Natty was the girl for... Actually, it might be fairer to say that Natty was the girl for 2008, not 2007. I don't know how she won it in 2007. Maybe that's an indication of how little competition I have. But I know I saved the best thing for last, because I know from the word go, you all probably noticed, $29 million, what the fuck did you spend it on? What the fuck did you do last month to lose $29 million? Well, as you notice down here, $33 million in media. That is because for the first time since I started playing TEW 2016 back last year, I actually took the game up on an offer to do something that they guarantee in this game, and that's making your own broadcaster. I made my own broadcaster. I made the TNA network, where I have coverage in the US, Canada, Mexico, the UK, Japan, and Australia. But the difference is, it isn't for the main roster. I didn't make it for the main roster. I didn't pull a WWE. But what I did was, I gave it to the developmental. I gave it to the developmental because of that. Yes, maybe a bad person, but the point is, I gave it to the developmental because I wanted, well, let's choose Finn Balor. Because of this. Look at the difference. He went up from a 12 to a 19 in a month. It's because I wanted to give my guys the opportunity to be able to improve in popularity down in developmental. Not to keep going, but look, he's gone up every month that I've had him. He's gone up 2, he went up 2 in a month, and he went up 2 this month. He's at a 9 now. Partially because he won the tag team titles, probably. But, point is, that's the reason why I spent $33 million. Because I spent $33 million. Yes, I had that much money to throw around. Look, I mean, this is probably by far the best indication. He was a 0 in March. He was a 0 in March. Now he's going to close out April as a 12. He went up 12 in a month. That's the reason why I made the very expensive decision. Let's just look at Marcus Owens before I let the point be had. As Marcus Owens went up 6 in a month, I made the very expensive decision to invest in my developmental. Surprisingly, Cody Rhodes has actually not gone up, but I made the very expensive decision to invest in my developmental because of the fact that I wanted my guys to be able to gain popularity while down in developmental, to where they could be a step ahead when they come up. And also, now, let's say, let's say one of my pay-per-view opportunities, I'm not happy with the pay-per-view coverage I'm getting in Canada. For example, I could say, okay, you know what? No. Okay, well, actually, let's say this. Let's say I'm not happy with the coverage I'm getting for Explosion, and I don't want to have to, just keep going and, getting a variety of television coverage for Explosion, and I just want one television provider. So I say, okay, screw it. I'm gonna go and move Explosion to the TNA network. I would have the ability to just say, screw it. They don't need it. They don't need it. They don't need, they don't need to be on television. They could be on the network. That's the thing. And that's one of the other reasons why I did it, because it allows me to now have the ability to move my show, pull my show back and say, no, I'm not putting it on TV. I'm putting it on my network. But for the most part, the only reason why I did it was because I wanted the ability to have my developmental on television. And now the best place to end it is here, because as you can tell, I have 97 people. 97 active wrestlers. You can look up and down the roster and see people that you've seen before, that you have heard of. Brent Albright, and you could also see people like Alex Price, who you've never heard of. Or Andy Douglas, who you never thought you'd see this popular. People you've seen. Anthony Nese, excessively popular. You could look and see people that you never thought would be wrestling in 2009. There's a lot of things that you can look and that you can feast your eyes on with this season. At 27, Daniel Bryan's retired because of injury. Things you never thought you'd see. Patellar tendon rupture in May 2006. The sad part is, about 40 days before Daniel was supposed to come back, and I was anticipating his return, he retired due to injury. Samoa Joe's the same way. He retired too because of injury. But he suffered it back in March 2004, which is the reason why you saw Hot Stuff Hernandez, which is exactly who you think it is, win the ROH title in March 2004 in a triple threat match not involving the person who was holding the belt at the time. Colt Cabana, Dan Payson, Dave Prazak in TNA, something you never thought you'd see. Devin Nicholas, Dixie Carter, Dolph Ziggler. Yes, Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth is in TNA. I signed him. D-Ray 3000 is still in TNA in 2009. Wow. Generico is actually one of the people that I signed, or brought over from the Canadian promotions, and one of the top guys I brought over, if not the top guy that I brought over, was Kevin Owens. I brought him in as Kevin Steen, but I kept calling him Kevin Owens, so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to change his name to Kevin Owens. Conan I brought in as a manager. Conan is actually managing the Naturals, and was brought in during the Naturals feud with LAX as a mutual party, but then he stuck around as a manager. Lashley's one of the people like BJ Whitmer who's having a tough time finding their groove. And the Briscoes also tough time finding their groove. Maurice was just brought in. Matt Morgan, Matt Sydal. That moment when you realize Matt Sydal is just about as popular as Melina. And that moment when you realize Mickie James is more popular than Matt Sydal. Pac, Petey Williams, Rene Dupree, I actually brought Renee in from WWE to be a part of the Canadian invasion. Rick Santel's probably a guy most of you don't know. Ricochet, Robert Roode. There's a lot of guys. Phil Shatter, Sonny Siaki, TJP. There's a lot of guys. I'm happy with the roster, even at 97, in all honesty, probably being excessively bloated, which I'm probably going to shrink down within the next couple of months. But either way, I've thoroughly enjoyed this season. It's crazy to think that John Cena is actually the most popular the top franchise player in the company. But either way, just, scrolling through this as I wrap things up, I have thoroughly enjoyed this season. Like, when I first started, there was no way I could tell you that at the time that I thought I would still be doing it almost 6 years later. Heck, there came a time a few months ago when I thought this season is done. I have nothing else to do. I have no other ideas for it, as my microphone keeps falling. I have no other ideas for it. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. But actually due in part to me buying Border City Wrestling and CZW went out of business too. Chikara went out of business. Chaotic, a lot of companies have gone out of business. Oh, and Internet Wrestling Syndicate, IWS. Yeah. After buying those two companies, that's what gave me that little push, that little kick in the pants to get back into this season and keep this season going. Initially, the initial idea was these guys were going to lead the first invasion, Juggalo Championship Wrestling, when I bought them back in January 2005, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen because, well, the one difference between, just pointing this out too, PWG went out of business. Pro Wrestling Iron went out of business. Pro Wrestling Zero went out of business. 3PW. A lot of bankruptcies. A lot of bankruptcies. Stampede, I actually bought Stampede too. I really did kill Canadian wrestling. Jeez. A lot of people came into my company from Juggalo Championship Wrestling, but the one thing that the Canadian companies had that Juggalo didn't is that the people that I brought from the Canadian companies were actually popular, to where they could hold a candle to some of my top guys, namely Kevin Owens, and the reasoning behind Alex Shelley being in it is because he was also quite popular and could hold a candle to some of the top guys. And that's why I chose to run the storyline like I did, where I added them to it. I mean, why I ran the invasion now, and maybe invested a little bit more into the invasion now than I did 4 years ago when I tried it with Juggalo. And just giving you a little glimpse one last time before we go of who the announcers are, of course, Don West and Mike TNA. So with that being said, as I wrap up and go back to pretending you're not here, let me just say that I hope you enjoyed this little glimpse into one season that I'm very proud of because of what I've been able to accomplish with TNA Wrestling over the last 5 years as a member of the company. And as I contemplate bringing in Joey Styles, this is where I bid you farewell for this edition of Inside TEW. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think of this series. And if you'd like to see more of Inside TEW, let me know down below, because as always, feedback is more than welcomed and appreciated. But if you don't want to leave a comment, you can always leave a like. Subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. And don't forget to ding dong that notification bell to always know when a new video comes live on Wrestling Express. Later.